U.S. importers are paying the lion's share of President Trump's tariffs on foreign goods. That is according to a recent study showing that non-U.S. firms shouldering only about 4% of that burden. And it may not end there. Our next guest warns tariffs are worsening the affordability equation, with living costs in the U.S. rising by nearly $2,000 per household last year, fueled by higher prices on imported goods. Joining us live, I'm pleased to say we have Pano Anthos. He is founder and managing partner over at XRC Ventures. Great to see you in person.
Great to see you, Sarah. All right.
So talk us through that a little bit, because the narrative so far is that you think about U.S. companies, they're eating a lot of the costs of tariffs versus the U.S. households, U.S. consumers themselves. But it seems like data is suggesting that this is also hitting households as well when you think about that $2,000.
Yeah, the costs are actually flowing on a kind of hidden basis, whether it's food costs, things like lumber, which create housing issues and costs associated with that. It's really like, it's a hidden set of costs that they cannot hold back on and they have to pass through. Mm-hmm. And if you're also, the other thing that no one's talking about is the sheer randomness of some of these tariff decisions and what it's doing to the import market, which is trying to maintain stability and pipeline for logistics and supply chain flows.
Well, let's talk about specific industries here, and I'm curious what you're seeing, particularly when it comes to retailers, an area that I know you have exposure to, because the knee-jerk reaction. You think about who would be impacted by these tariffs that we're talking about, random in nature, as you described them. You have to think that those are some of the companies that are first in line.
Yeah, and it's not easy to redirect to a different country of origin. If you're slapping a tariff on China, you don't simply move your manufacturing to Vietnam tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, you can't move at all. Metals is a great example. You're really stuck with supply chains that are well entrenched and are not going to be moving for 10, 15 years in some cases. As much as we would love onshoring, and we are a big believer in bringing on-demand manufacturing to the U.S., it's going to take a very long time. And so consequently, we're paying the price.
Well, I am curious about this, though, too, because when we talk about wages and affordability, I mean, there are a lot of people that will point to aggregate wage growth. And they'll say, look, when you look at wage growth and you look at inflation, things have more or less kept up. Obviously, we know once you get into the layers there, it's a much different story. If I'm an hourly wage worker, mm-hmm. and even a well-paid one, mm-hmm. why am I not above water, so to speak, when it comes to paying for the things I need to live?
Well, costs have gone up 50% faster than wages, and that is healthcare. And we all know that healthcare is not a controllable cost these days. Mm-hmm. Transportation has gone up dramatically. The cost of cars, for example, buying a car, leasing a car, renting a car. Childcare. It's not even in the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, but childcare is a massive impact on a third of the hourly workforce, of which 60% make less than $35,000 a year. And in 1960, when the poverty line was created, there's a new study out about whether the poverty lines now should be $140,000 a year, mm-hmm. on the basis of grocery bills as being a function of your overall wages. And now you look at the cost of living, and it's nowhere comparable to whereas in 1960, where you could have a single wage earner and someone staying at home. You have to have two wage earners because housing costs are so high. Yeah. And now you need childcare. And then childcare costs are going up by 30%.
I don't want to make this too political, but we talk on this program a lot about the problems.
Yep.
What is the solution? And the president last week, gave a big economic speech that was supposed to lay out some issues in addressing affordability. I'm not sure we really got that. He's got a big speech planned for tomorrow that's also supposed to address these issues. What can actually be done? Or is it just sort of the organic sort of ebb and flow of the economy that we have to live with?
I think, you can go over really two areas. One is healthcare costs. There's at least 25% waste in the healthcare system, which is trillions of dollars a year. I'll give you an example. A startup that we backed cuts the cost of radiology by 70%. And radiology is 10% of all healthcare costs. By doing nothing, by just creating transparency, kind of the Uber of radiology. And who would have thought, if you had a scan done, you don't have any idea what that cost was. No. What other purchase would you make and not know the cost of it? Yeah. So the lack of price transparency in the healthcare system is a huge issue. There are alliances corporations are forming to actually reduce the cost. And then there's another hidden cost, the brokers. And I don't mean to rant on brokers, but brokers are paid a commission, which means that the higher the cost of healthcare, the more they make. The incentives are all whacked.
Mm-hmm. I do wonder about the other side of it, the flip side of bringing costs down. What about when you think about wages coming up? You think about minimum wages actually rising in certain states. You point to California in your notes, for example.
Yeah, it's not going well. right? In two parts. One is there's not enough financial literacy in the hourly workforce. So for example, most people don't know what an APR is. So if they use earned wage access to actually kind of pull up their salaries or cash, they're actually paying a huge price for that. They need to have the literacy to understand that that's a very expensive trade to make. And frankly, raising wages only works if you're keeping costs abated, and they're not. Costs are, as I said, growing double what wages are growing.
Yeah, and this has become a much more important issue as I think a lot of voters have finally woken up to, well, they've felt the pain, but they've woken up to the idea of a lack of solution.
And it would have to be $35 an hour by 2035 to maintain a 2020 standard of living. No one can pay that.
All right, Pano, so we have to get you on to talk about that, particularly in an election year where this will certainly be coming up time and time again. Pano Anthos is founder and managing partner over at XRC Ventures.